In the last few weeks, I have watched every single Superman movie, not to mention a handful of episodes from a bunch of TV shows and even an entire season of Supergirl. I've read a metric shitload of Superman comic books, and I've even got some cool new props. All of that to say that in the last few weeks, I have also seen a ton of Lex Luthor.
Ahoy, ahoy! I did not know you were here.
Gene Hackman, Michael Rosenbaum, Kevin Spacey, Jesse Eisenberg, and Nicholas Hoult.
I know these names better than I know my own grandmothers.
In my opinion, all of these guys have put their own stamp on Lex Luthor. I myself have always been partial to Michael Rosenbaum. However, while I think that every single actor to ever portray Lex Luthor has brought something of value to the role, my buddy Chris does not agree. And he is here to tell you why everything I just said is wrong. But no, really, we are gonna have Chris give you a brief analysis of all of the iconic actors to play Lex Luthor. So let's pass it over to Chris and get into it.
What? I'm a genius. I'm incredible.
Here's something I hope you'll think is a fun fact. My default Halloween costume has always been Lex Luthor.
Ahoy, ahoy!
As a proudly bald man and the owner of several spiffy suits, it's always been easy for me to dress up as Lex Luthor every year, or as Hitman from the video game if I want to mix it up. But as such, I've always identified with the finest criminal mind of his time, even if you'd never know it by watching the films.
Superman will never...
Wrong!
That's right, Lex Luthor on the big screen in the Superman movies has always kinda sucked.
What I am bargaining with is what you do not have.
On TV, they nailed him, with Michael Rosenbaum offering the definitive portrayal on Smallville.
Now you'll die with all the rest.
But in the movies, none have ever really matched up. Why is this? Well, let's take a look at them, one by one. Let's start with Gene Hackman. I should preface this by saying that I have nothing but respect for Gene Hackman as an actor. In fact, I'd wager that the late Hackman might be the finest actor of his generation. But in my opinion, he is not a great Lex Luthor.
I know exactly where he's headed. Hackensack, New Jersey.
Why is that? Because in the Richard Donner films and in the Tom Mykewitz scripts, he's a buffoon who's too comical to ever really be taken seriously. He's so slimy that I never believed Luthor would be a powerful citizen of Metropolis, although to be fair, the movies never really went this route, with him much more of a recluse.
In the back of my mind, actually. This is a little idea I was toying with.
The goofy aspect is made all the worse by his choice of a sidekick, Ned Beatty's impossibly grating Otis, who looks like he wandered in out of a 1970s Burt Reynolds movie. And that's no shame on Beatty either, who absolutely killed in Deliverance, Network, and many other movies. But why is it that Donner seemed to be convinced that he had to turn them into Laurel and Hardy? Just doesn't really work, not for me anyway. Miss Tessmacher doesn't fare much better, with the character turning on Luthor in the climax of the first movie, but then inexplicably being his ally again in the second, even if in the deleted scenes of the first movie he tried to feed her to the lions, literally.
Why? Lex, why?
Because I love you.
What's worse is that Hackman has hair. Well, some hair. In the movie, Luthor is supposed to be vain and wearing a toupee, but it's Hackman's real hair and you can tell. He was balding in real life, and I suppose he didn't want to tempt fate by shaving it all off, so Luthor inexplicably wears a wig that makes him look like he's a balding middle-aged man. He does wear a bald cap in the finale and the opening scenes of Superman 2, but it looks really fake. The less said about Superman 4, the better, but at least Hackman is still somewhat fun to watch, if still not a very good Lex Luthor. Ironically, his screen sidekick, John Cryer, would play a far better Lex Luthor himself on the CW decades later.
Know that my way was the only way!
On to Kevin Spacey. Truth be told, I was excited when Kevin Spacey was announced as Lex Luthor because I figured he'd play the role much more seriously than Hackman did.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Which he does, to some extent. The issue is that Superman Returns is slavishly devoted to the Richard Donner films, so there's continuity between Spacey and Hackman's performance in that they're supposed to be the same guy. Well, but what does that mean? Well, once again, the movie revolves around land snatching. Spacey does play him with a lot more menace than Hackman ever did, especially when he's torturing the Man of Steel in the climax, but overall, this was just a so-so performance.
Now fly.
On to perhaps the most controversial person on this list, Jesse Eisenberg.
I don't know! I would not let them tell me! Now run!
Now, for one thing, one of the reasons that he was wrong, and one of the many reasons, is that he has hair, and a lot of it. Now, I get it. Zack Snyder tried to do something different with the character by making him more of a Mark Zuckerberg type, to the extent that they even hired the actor who played Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network and was nominated for an Oscar for it.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
People absolutely despise the performance, but he does do the one thing that the others never really managed. He convinced me that he would actually wield some influence in Metropolis. Batman v Superman, of course, was only supposed to be his introduction to the DCU.
And he ruined Zeus's plan to destroy mankind, and for that he was given a thunderbolt. True!
And had he continued in the franchise, he would have been bald and somewhat toned down from the over-the-top theatrical version he played in Batman v Superman. But nah, he wasn't good. On to the latest Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult. Of all the big-screen Superman actors, he probably comes the closest to nailing the role. He has the poise and intellect to make you believe that Luthor could wield influence and possibly shift the public against Superman, but he also plays Luthor as a complete psychopath, with his wide-eyed glee at destruction kind of unnerving and a little cartoonish as far as I'm concerned. Then there's also the aspect that he's so fragile in his masculinity that he keeps all his ex-girlfriends as prisoners in alternate dimensions. A new dimension to the part that I suppose is meant to be timely in an era where everyone talks about toxic masculinity. But is that really Lex Luthor? Now, here's what I like about Michael Rosenbaum in the part. For one thing, the guy looks fantastic bald.
Hello, Clark. Can't say I love what you've done with the place.
Seriously, the guy is a 1 in a million head. Watching him on his excellent podcast, I can't help but think the guy should grab some clippers and rock the Luthor look again. Another reason he's great in the show is over many seasons builds him up from being a friend and ally to Superman, well, or Clark Kent anyway, into an adversary, with him often operating in a moral gray zone, at least in the early seasons, as opposed to his mustache-twirling villainy. You get to know Lex Luthor, you get to understand where Lex Luthor is coming from. He's also poised and sophisticated, to the extent that I actually really do believe that Luthor could wield influence and become a truly dangerous enemy to Superman. You could have done a Superman movie where Lex becomes president of the United States, which actually happens in the finale of Smallville, and Rosenbaum would have been totally believable. In this series, it's shown that, of course, his eventual path is to the presidency, and the movies, quite honestly, should have brought Rosenbaum back as President Lex Luthor. I mean, it would have been timely, it would have been controversial, and it would have been really cool, even if, by necessity, they would have had to have dropped the Smallville continuity. As much as I like Tom Welling, I don't think he could still play Superman. After all, didn't James Gunn always say that Michael Rosenbaum was the best Lex Luthor ever? Why didn't it happen? If you have the best Lex Luthor, why not just give him the part? Anyway, that's our look at the cinematic versions of Lex Luthor, and to me anyway, none of them come close to matching up with Michael Rosenbaum's performance on Smallville. Do you agree or do you disagree? Make sure to let us know in the comments. But be nice.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.